I believe income inequality is the most serious problem we faced in the developed world and also in some developing countries like China. To get a sense of how bad the problem can get, let's take a look. It's a global problem. Let's take a look at the situation in the United States, the most advanced economy in the world, and also the most unequal. A look at U.S. income tax data will reveal that the income gap in the country has been widening over the past 15, 20 years. In 2005, though the total reported income of the whole country increased by almost 9%, the average income of the bottom 90% of Americans actually fell by about $172. The top 10% have reaped all the gains. Their share of total income has grown from 33% in the late 1970s to more than 50% now, which means the top 10% of the country earns half of the income. But even that understates the shift that has taken place. Though almost everyone in the top 10% has seen their incomes rise, the top 1% saw their incomes rise the most. They earn almost a quarter of total income. Top 1% earn a quarter, compared to about 20% about 5 years ago. And among the top 1%, the top tenth of a percent, that is 0.1, report an average income of $6 million a year. They gain the most. And the top 100th of a percent, that is 0.01, reported an average income in excess of $25 million. The top 300,000 people in America, which is about 0.1% of the population, collectively earn as much as the bottom 150 million. 300,000, 150 million. That's a very huge top and a very tiny top and a very huge bottom. The U.S. has not seen such income disparities since 1928, which is the eve of the Great Depression. Let me show you how this looks graphically. This is the graph of U.S. household income. It shows estimated calculations of U.S. household income in 2010, roughly to the nearest 100. And it's by every fifth percentile, from about the fifth percentile up to the 80th percentile, and then each point on the graph after that represents one percentile increase. As you can see, the line gets much steeper towards the very top of the income scale, from about 5 percentile to about 90th percentile or so. It's a very shallow gradient. From 90th to 95, it goes up to about 45-degree angle. Then after that, it shoots straight up. Those who aspire to hop from, say, the 30th percentile to 35th percentile would need to increase their cash income by about $4,000 annually. But those who aspire to hop from the 95th percentile to 99th percentile will require an increase of in excess of $325,000 a year. That's about 171%. So as a result, even households at, say, 98th percentile, which is roughly earns about $500,000 a year, they don't feel rich. That's because households at the 99th percentile are earning so much more. So society can no longer be stratified as working class, middle class, upper middle class, and rich. Right? Now it is working class, broad middle class, and then your obscenely filthy rich at their top. Now, it is almost the same situation here in Singapore. Singaporeans in the 41st to 50th percentile, that's the middle group, who wish to hop to the next highest income group, say 50th to 60th, you would need to increase your income by just 1,100 or so. But if you want to hop from the 81st to 90th percentile to 90th to 91st to 100th, your income will have to double from roughly about 12,000 to about 25,000. Now, why should this be so? Why is so much of the growth in income of recent years, almost all actually, going to the top 10%? Part of the explanation for this state of affairs is that the share of corporate profits, that is, the amount of profits that companies earn, as a percentage of GDP, has increased at the expense of wages. Wages as a share of national income in America, among the G10 countries. The G10 countries are the US, Japan, Germany, Britain, France, Italy, Canada, Netherlands, Belgium, Sweden, Switzerland. They declined. The share of wages declined from about 63% in 1980s to less than 59% now. In the meantime, corporate profits as a share of GDP has increased in all these countries from about 11% to more than 15%, 18% over the same period. In other words, capital has gained at the expense of labor. Some of us have the impression that things are somewhat better in Europe than in America. They're supposed to have a more civilized form of capitalism than the Americans, but some people, Stephen Roach, for example, says that this is not so. The structural forces, he says, that at work globally are also at work in Europe. Now, part of the explanation, there are many explanations for this. Part of the explanation, which I find the most relevant, of why capital has been gaining at the expense of labor, was provided by a man called Professor Richard Freeman of Harvard University. He says the advent of China, India, and the ex-Soviet Union has shifted the global capital-labor ratio massively against workers in the developed world. If China, India, and the ex-Soviet bloc had remained outside the global economy, there would have been about 1.5 billion workers in the world. Because they joined the global economy, there are now more than 3 billion workers producing for the global economy. He calls it the great doubling of the global workforce has caused the global capital labor ratio to be, according to him, 61% less in 2000 than what it would have been if China, India, and the ex-Soviet bloc had remained out of the global economy. By giving firms a new supply of low-wage labor, the doubling of the global workforce has weakened the bargaining position of workers in the advanced countries. And it's not just low-wage workers. As Professor Freeman points out, highly populous, low-wage countries like China, India, and Brazil have invested heavily in higher education. China alone produces more PhD graduates in the sciences and engineering than the United States. With an increased supply of highly educated persons from low-wage countries, low-wage developing countries, multinational firms can now offshore high-skilled work and hire graduates from universities worldwide. That is why even those in the 10th percentile in the US did not see their incomes rise as rapidly as those in the top 1%. And as we will see in a moment, I think that this is the reason, one reason for the recent political shifts that we have seen in our own country.